Other interesting cultural news, you have Maryland Firearm Licensing ruled unconstitutional, a victory for the Second Amendment, and the NRA actually did something. Which, please, take out a notebook and mark your calendars. This is the first time the NRA has done something productive in a decade or more. I can't help but notice that most of the rights that we've gained with the Second Amendment throughout the past decade have been used, thankfully, in large part, not just because of grassroots activists and individuals, but because of organizations like Gun Owners of America and Firearms Policy Coalition. There's a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of good. NRA, they sure raise a lot of money and call me a lot, but I simply tell them the same thing every time. Is Wayne LaPierre still in charge? He is? No, you will not get a penny from me. It's one of those instances where they're mostly known for bending the knee. The last good thing I can think of that the NRA does, and I know they do some good training and they do some safety training for a lot of people, that's appreciated. But in terms of civil rights and gaining rights back, the last thing I remember the NRA doing was gaining the right for concealed carry in Illinois, which was December 12th, 2012. Very easy date to remember. They successfully sued the state and got it to, I believe it is a shall issue, where if you did the application, they were supposed to give you that right you were born with. I don't think the government should have that. That's why I believe in constitutional carry. But your right to actually defend yourself outside of your home. Now, specifically, this is coming from the Maryland handgun licensing law, and it was ruled unconstitutional. And this is thanks to U.S. News. And they noted that, this by Nate Raymond, said, a U.S. appeals court on Tuesday declared that Maryland's licensing requirements for people seeking to buy handguns were unconstitutional, citing a landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision last year that expanded gun rights. Again, I'm not a doctor, but if you click subscribe, it may help with my speaking ineptitudes, my lack of enunciation, and my stuttering. It's not 100% certainty. There's no guarantees in life. However, that very well could be. I'm just saying, it's worth trying out. Now, nevertheless, back to the article. Quote, a 3-panel judge from the state of Richmond, again, reverse that. Nevertheless, subscribe. Perhaps it will fix this. Quote, a 3-judge panel of the Richmond, Virginia-based 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on a 2-to-1 vote blocked enforcement of a 2013 Maryland law that required people to undergo training and background checks before applying for a license to buy handguns, saying it violated the right to keep and bear arms under the United States Constitution's Second Amendment, unquote. Which, yes, is very true. I'm glad they finally ruled in favor of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. It's a rare thing to actually see that happen. And the issue is everyone always barks about, oh, what about the safety? Well, hell is paved. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's one of the oldest sayings of all time, and it's very true. And you see this from the most evil governments and states. They'll say, oh yeah, you can have a gun, but you have to have all these requirements. Well, they're going to make the test as long and burdensome as possible, and expensive and fiscally painful as possible. You saw this when Illinois first got that guarantee for that right. They said, okay, now we have to issue them. However, that means we're going to have you take a 12-hour class. Or I actually forget the amount of hours, but it's a prohibitively long amount of class. It's a very hard test. They worded it confusing. They made it as burdensome as possible because they don't want you to have rights. They want the government to have rights, not you, which I find morally disgusting. That's morally vacuous and disgusting to say the least. Since if you look at any history book, I know the U.S. public schools really don't teach much history these days, but if you look at any the most evil, heinous acts in history, it's always when the government disarms honest, law-abiding citizens. Now, in these cases, this was just to buy a handgun. So just to buy a handgun, you had to go to the trainings and background checks for getting a license. And you saw this with Illinois. Now, Illinois had, supposedly if it has this BS, it's called a FOID card. Firearm Owner Identification, whatever that acronym is for. And it was literally the same thing as a background check. But when you buy your firearm from a FFL, Federal Firearm License Dealer, they do the same background check. So Illinois just did it because they knew it was a burden. And that most people wouldn't want to take that extra step to fight for their rights. And it in many ways that worked. A lot of people I know in Illinois, they never got that license to buy a gun, even had to have that license to buy ammo. So just to buy ammo, if you were born in the Soviet Union, I mean Illinois, I forget, they're so similar in many ways, that just to buy ammo, you had to have a card. And that card, you had to have the test, and they did background check. And it was the same exact background check you do when you buy a gun. Ridiculous, to say the least. Now, going back to the article, they know that the Supreme Court's 2022 ruling in a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin required gun laws to be, quote, consistent with the nation's historic tradition of firearms regulation in order to survive a Second Amendment challenge. They continue to say, quote, Maryland has not shown that this regime is consistent with our nation's historic tradition of firearm regulation. U.S. Circuit Judge Julius Richardson, an appointee of Republican former President Donald Trump, wrote in the ruling. Richardson called that the Maryland law was, quote, an additional preliminary step that subjected law-abiding people to wait a 30-day waiting period before they can begin the usual process to procure and acquire a firearm through a separate background check system. And don't even get me started on these waiting periods or waiting days. The most hilarious thing about COVID, if you could actually look at a silver lining, is that in California, when the lawlessness had reached peak and the riots were everywhere, which they voted for, is one of those instances where a lot of people that live there, they went to the gun store and go, hey, I need a gun to defend myself because the police are being told by the mayor to stand down and do nothing. And the gun stores, all these new gun buyers, they would say, well, you can do the application today, but you have to wait 7 days because that's California law. And the citizens of California were aghast, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Well, you voted for this. You decided those laws. They got passed and you did nothing. And some of those people, ironically, even applauded those laws at the time. And only then did they realize the importance of the Second Amendment and why those laws are unconstitutional, morally vacuous, to say the least. Now, it'll be interesting to see how this type of ruling has a ripple effect. Because I can't help but think, there are a lot of states with these types of prohibitive, anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment types of rules and laws in place. And even though times might seem bleak and there's a lot of anti-gun states, there seems to be more and more gun rights being won. Now, interestingly enough, in this specific case, if I can pull it up really quick. Now, they noted that this was a NRA-backed the lawsuit that challenged the law that covered the legal cost of litigation, the NRA spokesperson said. So, interestingly enough, they actually did something for once. It is a rare occurrence. Again, mark this in the history books. And again, I understand they do perform some good trainings and they have some good people that work there. But time and time again, I've seen them bend the knee and give the government an inch. And of course, if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. So, out of curiosity, let me know in the comments, when it comes to the Second Amendment, who do you think is the best organization to donate to or be a part of to fight for your rights? Is it still the NRA? Or is it something like Gun Owners of America? Or Firearms Policy Litigation? There's a couple organizations that are much, in my opinion, much more effective at gaining our rights. So that's why I'm so astonished to actually see the NRA noted in this article. So let me know in the comments. It'll be fascinating to hear what you have to say. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Don't forget to take the time to really write a couple good comments. In terms of the feedback, is greatly appreciated, even if it's harsh. I always say, even if it's a harsh critique, that's how you grow the most. Also, trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of November. So if you can click that button, I would especially appreciate it. Lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.